Hello everyone, I hope you can all hear me okay. Today we'll be taking a look at service level agreements and a practical view to implementing it within Supportworks. Now there's been quite a lot of interest around service level agreements, and for those of you who are familiar with me, I work as an application consultant for Hunbill, and I have been involved in managing some of your implementations, and so it's nice to have everyone here today. And if I haven't worked with you already, I'm hoping we might have an opportunity to work together sometime in the future. Okay, so today we're going to take a look at service level agreements and how we can implement this in Supportworks. Though this is much more of a practical session, so I'll give you a quick overview of service level agreements, and then we'll go into Supportworks and actually see how we set them up and how we manage them on a daily basis. You would have the opportunity to raise any questions you may have at the end of the session, so you would have a question panel. So feel free to send in any questions that relate to this topic that you may have as we go through. Okay. So today we're going to cover a few topics here. We're going to look at the best practice when defining service level agreements in Supportworks. We're also going to take a look at priorities and our priority matrix. Why do we use them? How do we configure them? And what is the main purpose of having them defined in Supportworks as well? Then we'll take a look at operational level agreements, and then we'll take a look at review periods against the service level agreements as well. We'll review escalations and how we manage escalation emails, and then we'll take a look at some of the metrics that we can obtain from the SLAs that we define, and we'll also be able to look at some areas of the reporting structure in Supportworks, which allows you to report on the SLAs, so we see how we're doing with regards to that. So let's start off by taking a look at what a service level agreement is. A good definition of a service level agreement is an agreement between a service provider and a customer, which describes the services that are offered by the provider to the customer. It also describes the service level targets that are involved in providing that service. It also allows us to specify the responsibilities of both the service provider and the customer. Now, this is quite interesting because we talk about agreements between a service provider and a customer. In reality, this is an agreement between yourselves as a business and the customers you support. Those customers could be internal customers, or they could be external customers, or they could be a combination of both as well. The service level agreement is what we obtain when we align a customer's requirements with the services that we offer as a business. So a customer comes up with a number of requirements, so that could be assistance to do with supporting a printer, for example. And we, as a business or service provider, agree to provide the printing service or support against the printer to the customer within agreed timescales. We define what is covered, so in this case, It's the printer support, probably updating printer drivers could be included in that as well. And it's a way of us defining what we can offer the customers in order to meet their requirements. There are times when a customer's requirements might exceed what you can actually provide as a service provider. Therefore, before a service agreement is put in place, we have several days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months of negotiation going back and forth between the business and the customer in order to ensure that what we provide is aligned with the customer's requirements, and any requirements which cannot be covered are clearly defined and both parties are aware of that. So we've looked at describing the service. A service agreement would also include things such as the support hours. So we're going to provide printing support, for example. Do we provide that 24/7 or is it during business hours? That needs to be included within the service level agreement as well. What are the responsibilities of both parties? So for example, the customer might be required to log a call with the service provider within working hours, specifying what's requested, in this case, a printer to be installed or connection to a printer. The service provider's responsibilities would also be stated. We would deal with those queries we'll deal with those queries within a specific time frame. We will communicate with the customers in a particular way. So all these are included in our service level agreement. Now, I've been involved in a number of implementations, and I've noticed that in most scenarios, customers are looking to implement service level agreements within Supportworks. And you have the idea of the ITIL definition, which most customers try to implement. But again, ITIL is much more of a framework. You need to look at how that can then be made to work for your organization. So we understand what needs to be included in the agreement. Now, how do we go about actually defining that in Supportworks? So, what's included in a service level agreement? We need to understand what's covered. As I mentioned, we specify those services which we are agreeing with the customer in terms of delivery times, in terms of when we would support it, what kind of support we offer, and so on and so forth. Things like your configuration items, your hardware, software, network items, they can be linked to a service level agreement. So you could have a service level agreement that says we would support all the hardware within your organization. We could also have a service agreement that includes support for services that are offered to an organization. We can link service level agreements to charge centers. So if you're part of a charge center, then we have a specific service level agreement which you purchase. We can also have service level agreements which are customer specific. So a customer might decide to buy a gold, to purchase a gold contract with you, for example, which has its own predefined service level agreement. Or you could have a bronze or silver SLA as well. Service level agreements would also include performance targets. When we talk about performance targets, we're looking at what we're offering the customer. So we're offering support, we're offering services, we're looking after configuration items, we're looking after tickets that customers log. We need to be able to define how we respond to the customer. How soon do we respond to tickets that are logged? Do we respond to tickets in the same way? Do we respond to tickets logged against a server, for example, much quicker than we respond to tickets logged against a printer? All this should be included within your performance targets. This way we can see how we're performing and how well we're doing in meeting those agreements that we had with the customer. Okay? Performance targets are normally captured as SLA service level targets. So we look at how quickly do we fix the calls that are logged by customers? How quickly do we restore a configuration item back into a working stage? Service level agreements might also include third-party contracts. Some organizations require involvement of third parties in order to provide services that they do to their customers. When defining a service level agreement, it's good to take a look at the agreements you have with those third parties because they link in to your service level agreements. So for example, if we provide a printing service to a customer and we have a third party that manages an element of that printing service, we would have agreements with the third party defining what's being supported, when they will be supported, and how they respond to us, how quickly do they address any issues that may arise with that printing service. This then should cascade through to our service level agreement, because when we define what these targets are with our customers, it needs to include the targets that have been set between our business and the third party. In other words, a third party contract underpins our service level agreement. There may be scenarios as well where we have services or involvement with other areas within the business. Understanding how quickly other areas within the business respond to our service desk would enable us to define clear service level agreements, which ensures that we meet the service level performance targets that we have set. Also within the service level agreements, we need to include reports. This could be reports to the customer. This could be reports to our business, or both. Reports to the customer would specify how we're doing. So we had some requirements that the customer wanted. How are we performing in respect to those agreements? Reports to the business would specify what kind of workload we have. Are we getting a lot of high priority calls coming through? Do we need more resources on the service desk? All of that can be justified by the reports we obtain from our service level agreements. A major part of SLAs, or service level agreements, are the service level targets, otherwise known as priorities. Let's take a scenario here. A customer logs a ticket with us. And we have a target resolution time. So ticket gets logged and ticket gets resolved at some point in time. The ticket gets logged and it gets resolved at some point in time. In between, we could allocate 8 hours for that activity. So from the moment a call gets logged with us to the point where the call gets resolved, we set ourselves a target of 8 hours to deal with that query and make sure that the ticket is fully dealt with and resolved within the targets. We also have what we call response times. A response time is a subset of your fixed time, which is the 8 hours defined here. The response target is a target that we set ourselves to acknowledge the ticket that has been raised by the customer. We could say 3 hours, for example. So we have 8 hours to resolve the ticket, 3 hours to acknowledge the fact that we've got the ticket in, and if done accurately, we should have a happy customer and a happy desk. We can also include alerts within the time frame. In this case, we've got 8 hours to fix the ticket. If the ticket has not been fixed within 6 hours, we could configure alerts or warnings to be provided to our analyst to ensure that the ticket is looked at and addressed in order to meet our resolution time. We can also define escalations within our priorities. And escalations are used to identify certain points within our targets. Now, taking a look at this diagram that we've got, we can see the different elements that can be added to the priorities that we define in Supportworks. Now, let's cast our mind back to the SLAs. So the SLAs, as we said, is an agreement between ourselves and the customer which defines what's been provided and how it will be provided and all the metrics that are associated with it. Priorities are where we actually define those timings. So we have a fixed time target and a response time targets that can be defined within our priorities. Our priorities can also define things such as our support hours. Are we performing a 24/7 operation, or do we have standard working hours? Do we have out-of-office working hours? All that can be defined within your priorities as well. So when a call is logged within those time frames, we can see how the call is being managed through to resolution. Now we're going to take a look at how we actually implement SLAs and priorities in Supportworks. Okay. In Supportworks, we manage SLAs and priorities from the administration menu. We go to the Manage Service Level Agreements menu option, and we have a number of tabs in here. We're going to start off with the Service Level Agreements. You can add a new service level agreement by defining a unique name for that agreement. Now, you might have a gold agreement that's in place. You could have incident-specific service level agreements. You could have service level agreements that relate to your standard operational hours, and so on and so forth. In this example, I'm going to specify a name. So we'll go with Gold Support. We can also define the type of service level agreements that are being created here. A service level agreement could be corporate. It means it's applicable to the wider audience, so a whole organization. You could have SLAs that are applicable to specific customers. So there could be customer-specific SLAs. You could have service level agreements that are applicable to services, and you can have those that cascade through to third party. Once you've set a name and a type, we can also define business owners and IT owners against our service level agreements. Now we talked about the SLA being an agreement between two parties. This is where we define members or representatives of those two parties. So here we have an IT owner who would always be an analyst on Supportworks. And we have a business owner who would be a customer within Supportworks. You can also enter a brief description around the service level agreement. Okay, you can add that. When we go back into the service level agreement, we have all the tabs that are available. Now your service level agreement can have a start date. So we could say that starts from today. So it's effective as of today. Another element of your service level agreement are priorities that you can link to this SLA. Priorities are linked to an SLA by clicking on the Associate button, and you can create a new priority. So for example, we could call this Gold P1. The naming convention is totally up to you. You can also specify the time zone that is covered within this agreement. So we're going to go with GMT. Priorities consist of response times and fixed timers, and this is where we set them. We can specify our response and fixed times in hours or minutes, or we can specify them with regards to business working days. So for example, we can have an 8-hour response and a 16-hour fix. Click on the apply button and that saves that record. Now we've specified 8 hours and 16 hours here. This will be in line with our support hours. So here we can define what our default hours of business are. And it's just a case of dragging along to indicate your business hours. This is currently set to 9 to 5, Mondays to Fridays. The support hours are very important when setting up priorities because the SLA timers, which were activated at the point of logging a call, are only active during those support hours. So in this example, if a call gets logged at 5 o'clock on a Friday, the SLA timers are paused until 9 o'clock the following Monday. You can also specify holiday exclusions, and these are times that are excluded from the actual SLA timers. So this could include any bank holidays, any non-working days within the organization as well. So we've got an SLA created, we've got a priority created for the Gold P1, and we can then link that to our Gold Support SLA by clicking on the priority from the drop-down list and adding it. And that shows up within our priorities here. We can create several other priorities and associate them to this Gold Support. So I'll just walk you through all the other elements of an SLA, and I'm going to use an SLA that's been predefined in here. Okay, so we talked about setting the name of the SLA, we set the type, we can link that to charge centers, we can also specify a valid a start date for our SLA, so that's the valid from date. We have our IT owner, we've got our business owner, and we just looked at how we create the priorities that can be added in here. So we currently have 3 priorities that have been created here. Could create another one. and I'll give us a 16-hour response. 60 hours fixed. And this follows the same business hours. You can link that. And that shows up as one of the priorities that is linked to this SLA. Priorities allows us to set a level of importance to the calls or tickets that we receive. Sometimes it's well defined and well communicated within organizations. In other scenarios, analysts might struggle trying to assign the right priority to a call. In those scenarios, we have a priority matrix that can be useful. A priority matrix is a way of defining a priority based on the impact it has and the urgency associated with it. The impact being the effect of that particular ticket in this case, and the urgency, how quickly we have to provide a resolution. You could have different impact levels defined and different urgency levels defined within the organization. You have the common high, low, and medium priority impact and urgencies that are used. You may want to work with 5 or fewer people affected, between 6 and 100, more than 100 impacted. So the way you define your impact and urgency levels are really up to you within the organization. Let's go ahead and set an impact and urgency level for that support P4 priority that we created a few minutes ago. If the impact is low and the urgency is low, then we want to associate a support P4 to that ticket. That goes into your priority matrix. Now we have different priorities that can be set against a ticket based on the impact and urgency that an analyst selects against the call. Within our service level agreement, we can also capture information such as references relating to the SLA. So this could be documentation that have been signed, so the actual contract that was signed. This could be some amendments that have been made to the service level agreements. This could be different meeting notes that have been had. So it could have been some meetings had between your business owner and your IT owner. You can capture all that information within the references section. This allows you to specify a unique title, you can specify the type of document that you wish to add, and you can add any of those type of documents. And you can then specify the location of that document. And that provides you with a link to that reference documentation. When SLAs are created, there are times when we introduce new services. There are times when some amendments might be required. There are times when we just want to have a quick catch-up to see how we're performing with relation to that SLA, and also see if there are any improvements that can be made to it. An SLA that worked in January 2016 might need some amendments due to some new services that are now being covered within that SLA in, say, December 2016. So we have the option of adding review periods into our Supportworks application here. The review periods tab allows us to add documentation that relates to any reviews that we perform against this service level agreement. Let's take a look at some of those that we have here. Now, an example of a review that we've got are quarterly reviews. So we've got a Q2 review, which is a bespoke review. So it's not periodical. We're not having these reviews on a monthly or weekly basis, but we actually specify the time for it. So you can use any of those options. Depending on the drop-down option you select here, you will have the corresponding tabs enabled. So if I say periodical, that becomes enabled. And if we say it's a monthly one, then we can set the values as well. So we can set a date for the review. And because the review takes place between a business representative and an IT representative, we need to communicate that to them as well. The communication can take the form of emails. In Supportworks, we allow you to specify a mailbox that can be used for the email communication, and you can define an email template that will be circulated or communicated to those two owners. You can also send a Supportworks messenger communication to the IT owner. Now, this is only applicable to the IT owner because you would need to have a Supportworks license or access to Supportworks client in order to receive the Supportworks messenger notifications. So we capture review periods within our SLA, and we can set that review as an active one or an inactive one. You can have as many reviews defined in Supportworks as you require. So in this example, we have a quarterly review. So the next review is that which will take place in June, on the 17th of June. Q3 can also be scheduled in Supportworks so that the notifications are sent out prior to the review. And once the review takes place tomorrow, then the next review is displayed within the next review field. Any details around the review can be summarized on Supportworks as well. This allows you to have one place for managing all SLA-related documentation. So you can, at a glance, take a look at a service level agreement, understand what's going on with this, understand any documentation, go through any documentation that relates to the agreement, as well as any reviews that have been performed against it, and details of what actually went on during those review meetings. So we take a look at one of those review details that we've got here. So this could be a summary of the minutes of the review that took place in April. When the next review takes place tomorrow, we can also document what was discussed, and we can have that for future purposes. You can also add third-party contracts that relates to this service level agreement. So if there are any dependencies on a third party, you can define that within Supportworks as well. In order to have those third-party contracts defined, you need to have your third-party suppliers defined within Supportworks. So that takes us through the lower tab that we have against service level agreements. So far we would be able to define what our priorities are, our hours of support, how we can select the right priority based on impact and urgency if required. We can have documentation references about the SLA, also details around reviews that assist us in improving the services that we provide and the targets that are detailed within our SLA. An important part of an SLA is an operational level agreement. And this is, simply put, an agreement between internal teams within the organization. Very similar to what you have with SLAs. Major difference is an SLA is an agreement between your business and your customer. An operational level agreement, or OLA, is an agreement between operational teams or internal teams within your business. A good example of that would be a relationship that could take place between your service desk and, say, your network team. Setting up operational level agreements in Supportworks is very similar to the way we go about setting SLAs. By clicking into operational level agreements, you would see that some of these fields seem to be replicated over from what we had from building up SLAs. Again, we define a name, a unique identifier for that operational level agreement. It specifies the kind of agreements that we are referring to here. We also specify the internal team that the service desk is going into an agreement with in here. So that could be any of the teams that you have defined on Supportworks. So in this example, it's the desktop support team. It could be the network team. It could be your infrastructure team. It could be your customer services team. But we define the group. And when this operational level agreement is applied to a call, then the call automatically goes to the correct team. You could also have a specific analyst within the support group that you're having this agreement with that the call needs to go to. This can all be defined within the operational level agreement form. Very similar to what we had with SLAs, operational level agreements also define our service targets. So how quickly do we need to fix any queries that do arise? How quickly do we need to respond to them as well? So priorities are defined. What are the working hours? So we have a server team who might have a completely different set of business hours to your service desk team. The priorities would define the hours where this operational level agreement is enforced within. So when is it applicable? Okay? So in a similar fashion, we have different priorities that can be defined. Again, the priorities would have response times and fixed times. Now, when defining response and fixed times for operational level agreements, it's important to ensure that the time that is specified is a subset of the time specified within the parent priority, which will be assigned to a ticket. So for example, if we have a call logged to our service desk team and we have a 20-hour fix time assigned, allocated to that, then any internal communications or any internal assistance that would be performed between the service desk and other teams should take place in less than 20 hours. Because anything more than that means we risk breaching our SLAs. So this should always be taken into consideration when building your operational level agreement priorities. The fixed time would always have to be, or should always be, a subset of the parent priority. Similar to what we had with the parent priority, we can have support hours defined, as well as any exclusions, which allows us to turn the timers on and off, or pause the timers against the ticket. We can have a priority matrix as well, based on impact and urgency. It takes the guesswork out of assigning priorities to a ticket. We can capture references relating to the operational level agreement. We can also capture review periods. How often do we want to review those agreements that we have internally. This could become part of your continuous service improvement process. So we review how we're doing. Do we need to make any changes here? How does that then affect the SLAs we have with our customers? Does that mean we also need to review that? These are questions that would arise when you start managing reviews against your operational level agreements. So the operational level agreement forms part of an SLA, and you can link an operational level agreement, or you can associate it with an SLA by highlighting it and clicking on the select button. Other elements we have within our SLA includes configuration items. We can specify which configuration items are associated or covered by this service level agreement. In this case, we have a number of servers and network switches which are covered by this single service level agreement. We can also define services where this SLA becomes applicable. So we have a support SLA for different services. We have a support SLA that can be linked to configuration items as well. We can also associate a service level agreement with an organization. This allows you to define things such as a gold contract, a silver contract with your customers. So we can go in here and link that to that organization. Now, whenever we log a call for a member of the organization, the default will be set to the service level agreement. If we have more than one service level agreement that is applicable, then we would have a list of service level agreements that we can apply to that organization. You can also link customers to service levels. So a customer might have purchased a specific SLA, or we might choose to apply a specific SLA to a customer. We can also see any active requests that have been logged against this SLA. We can filter that to display just the breached requests as well. We can keep track of who's done what and when. We can also manage thresholds within our service level agreements. This allows us to define things such as the amount of downtime that can be accommodated against the service or a CI that is linked to this SLA before we have a huge problem, because it would affect the targets that we have set ourselves. We can also have service level requirements that are captured, and that would be important in cases where we haven't actually defined the SLA, or we have new services that are going to be delivered, and we're looking at how we can actually set that up and define the functionality around that in Supportworks. So this is how we manage service level agreements in Supportworks. Now, as part of this, we also have escalation triggers which we can set. This allows us to specify warning times, alert times within the fixed time or response times that we set ourselves. An escalation trigger can be set as an action that takes place once that particular timeline is reached. So in this example, 20 minutes before the fixed time is met, we can have a series of actions that take place. We could decide to escalate the call, or we can decide to send gentle reminders in terms of Supportworks messenger notifications. We can have indicator arrow changes that can be applied. We can also have notifications that take place, sending emails to specific individuals. We can also manage call conditions in here. Now, most of you are familiar with the emails that we send out to specific individuals, so you can specify within your address book who would be a recipient. We've also included escalation roles, which allows you to define more complex rules in determining who would receive your notifications. These rules are set up using the script escalation notification, and a verb which defines a role. And I'll show you how that gets set up. Escalation notifications are configured within the service level management menu option within Supportworks. We have some predefined options in here which defines a role, in this case a customer. It also defines what kind of email mailbox template gets sent out to them. We can specify the risk, we can obtain the email source based on one of 4 methods. We can have a specific email, so it always goes to that person. We can base it on the call record and match it against different call fields that we have in our open call table. We can also have a match with, which matches against details that you configure on the right hand side here. In this example, it's matching it's carrying out a match against the customer ID field. We can also have a discover method, in which case we can link 2 sides of a database to obtain the data, the information we want relating to the email. So in this example, we are obtaining the email from the SW data table, the SW data database, user DB table, and the key search field, looking at the email and determining who the recipient of the call of the notification would be. You can also test by entering a call reference number, and you can see if that's been configured correctly. It should bring up the email address that it's been matched with. There are different examples that you can set in here, and we have details on our community portal on how you can configure all the escalation emails. You then can define different roles, and by defining the roles, you can add that as the verb within your escalation triggers. Hence, we've got that here. So how does it then apply to the calls that are logged in Supportworks? The escalation actions allows us to view tickets visually and understand where they are within their service level targets. When logging calls as well, we can have those SLAs applied, and we can set our priority based on the impact. You can link those SLAs to things like your call profiles, and so whenever this call profile is selected, the priority can be displayed. Finally, we can report on the different SLAs we have. We have a few reports which we can generate in Supportworks using our fixed by times, the actual time when the call was fixed. We can measure any breaches or any metrics that relate to the SLA. We have some custom HTML reports. Which relates to SLAs as well, so SLA specific ones, including performance reports, which we can run. We can also have dashboards that show us how we're performing in relation to our SLAs. And all this information then becomes useful to you as an SLA manager or someone who's responsible for obtaining metrics against SLA to see how we're performing. And that is a quick overview of how we implement service level agreements in Supportworks. I'll now invite you to provide us with or to ask any questions by typing them into the question section on the GoToWebinar panel. Okay, so one of the questions we have here is a question around, are there any significant changes to be made to the SLA in the nearest future? Yes, there are. We are looking at introducing some new SLA rules, which would allow you to manage SLAs a bit more around your tickets in our next version of Supportworks, which is ITSM 4.1. So this would allow you to define default SLAs against a customer and default SLAs and SLA rules to be used against different core classes. Okay, so we have another question in here. So Audrey says, I don't see a lot of options you've shown during this demo, and we have Supportworks version 7.62. Okay, now most of the options that were demonstrated today are on an ITSM application. So it would depend on the version of your application, Audrey. If you've got ITSM 3.5.0 and above, you would have most of the functionality that I have demonstrated today. We have another question from Dio. It says, do you reckon that there should be one universal SLA between different departments in an organization, or should it be applied across each service provided? Now, it does depend, because if you have, what you're looking at with regards to SLA are the kind of calls that are the tickets. So if different departments have different ways of dealing with the tickets, they could have different SLAs, and different associated priorities as well. So for example, your service desk could have a set of priorities. So what your service desk classifies as a priority 1 might not be a priority 1 for, say, your finance team if you have a finance support team. So you can define your SLAs in different ways. There's so many options to it. As long as it specifies what's being covered, what's been supported, and the timeline around that, then it shouldn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter. There isn't a hard or fast rule around how your SLA should be applied. I think those are all the questions that have come in.
Yeah, if we have no further questions, we'll just round it up now. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and there'll be a recording available for you to download. Thank you.
Thank you very much.